Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Women United, the disparate impact of COVID on our community and what comes next. Part of a Learn United series designed to highlight a variety of voices and relevant topics in our community. Today, we will discuss the current climate for women in the workforce and the ongoing pursuit of economic and social equality. I'd like to introduce Council Member Lourdes Barrasso de Padilla, a first-generation Cuban American who was born and raised on the east side of Columbus, and in November 2021 made history by becoming the first Latina to be elected as a member of the Columbus City Council. She has an extensive background in youth development and leadership and has served with City Year for more than 20 years. Among her many accolades, she is a graduate of Project Diversity, Leadership Columbus, and the Academy for Leadership and Governance Executive Fellowship Program. She has served as a commissioner with the Ohio Latina Affairs Commission, as a founding member of Create Columbus Commission, and is a member of United Way's Education Impact Council and Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Currently, she serves as a board member of the YWCA Columbus, the director for Latina Mentoring Academy, an advisory board member for the Columbus chapter of the New Leaders Council, a member of the Columbus Police Chiefs Advisory Panel, and a member of the Columbus City Schools Community Engagement Committee. She has also been honored as one of Business First's 40 Under 40 and was named a Distinguished Hispanic Ohioan by the Ohio Commission on Latino Affairs. Council member, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, we're very happy to have Christy Angel joining us. She is CEO of one of Central Ohio's most respected social justice organizations, YWCA Columbus, which serves more than 5,000 families, women, and girls annually. She is now guiding the agency through the current social justice movement, with the transformation of the agency's leadership and social justice department and the launch of a new racial equity education program. I would also like to welcome Emilia Robinson to today's panel. Emilia is the Opinion and Community Engagement Editor for the Columbus Dispatch, and she has been recognized at the state and national level for her journalistic contributions. She brings 25 years of experience writing for the Mansfield News Journal, and most prominently, the Dayton Daily News, where she won numerous awards for column, editorial, and feature writing, including the 2020 Best Column from the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, the 2021 Best Feature Writer from the Ohio Associated Press Managing Editors, and Best Newspaper Column in Ohio in 2019 and 2020 by the Society of Professional Journalists. She is a 2020 Kiplinger Program Fellow, a founding member and former longtime president of the Greater Dayton Association of Black Journalists, and has also served on the Dayton Sister Committee and Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Dayton Man and Woman of the Year Committee. Emilia is passionate about issues affecting Central Ohio, and we are very excited to have her with us here today. As a reminder, please feel free to put your questions in chat. So without further ado, let's begin this discussion. Ladies, after the outbreak of COVID-19, 5.4 million women left the workforce and 2.1 million have yet to return. For women looking to re-enter the workforce, how can we best support them as they navigate the job search process? And I'll start it off with, I'll start it off with Emilia.
Well, one thing I think we need to remember is that a woman's motivation may be different than what a man might be motivated by. A lot of women right now are the primary caregivers for their families. And not only are they taking care of their children, but they're also taking care of their parents in a lot of cases. And sometimes we forget that some of the push and pull that women have to go through. And during the pandemic, we kind of noticed the disparities in childcare and how that has definitely impacted women in a greater sense. A lot of the childcare workers are, in fact, obviously women. So you have women who are working in childcare who are now forced to decide if they're going to take care of their own children or their clients' children. So it's just a push and pull that women go through that we sometimes forget about. We need to be cognizant of at all points.
And I'll jump in next. I think one thing that we, as we're coming into what this next phase is of after the pandemic that we're still recovering from and going through, I think that we can't forget the lessons that we learned. And I think one of the big lessons was that if you remove barriers for people, they will show up for you, right? And I think that that's a important lesson for our employers is how are we making it easier for people to work? How are we removing barriers for people? How are we making it so, I remember in my organization, my other day job, I work at a nonprofit, trying to get folks on a Zoom or even a conference call was difficult. I mean, this was not a place where people were comfortable. And we had all of this amazing technology that we quickly had to advance to bring people together. And so I think we need to think about how do we work differently and how do we provide platforms for people to work so that we are addressing some of their needs and concerns. And that means that as employers, we need to shift our thinking, right? I remember hearing about there's a company here in Columbus that a good number of their workers were immigrants, refugees, and migrants, and they were working a shift that they couldn't find childcare. So literally the employer changed this whole entire shift. He didn't look for new employer or new employees. He didn't say this isn't going to work for us. He said, how can we make this work for the workforce that we have? How do we keep the workers who are loyal to us, who are here, who know the job, and how do we make it easier for them? And I think that that is system change that we need to start to think about. And I think to the point that Emilia made, how do we start making real investments in early childcare? How do we make it universal pre-K? And that's something that we've been talking about at the City of Columbus. Councilmember Brown has been really digging into this space of early childhood development and thinking about how are we creating more spaces that are accessible to folks, because it's not only about getting folks back into the workforce, it's really investment in our future and in our kids and in our future workforce. And so ensuring that parents know that their kids are someplace safe, that they are in a learning environment, and that creates more time for me as a parent where I can go find work, I can go do whatever it is that I need to do to take care of my family, whether that's educational opportunities or workforce opportunities. So I think, again, it's about a change in our system, and we are at a time where we can do that now because we had to. When we had to, it worked. So why do we have to go back to where we were? Let's advance to where we can go instead of thinking of, let's just go back to the thing that we knew before, because we're all living in a new reality.
I gotta throw this in there too. You said a change in mentality for employers. It also has to be a change in mentality for society as a whole. Like the pandemic really taught us that people don't have to do things they don't want to do. And right now, people aren't doing things they don't want to do. Like, yeah, if you go to a restaurant and you mistreat a waitress, and then you go, well, people just don't want to work. You have to realize there's more to it. People don't have to take it, and people know it. And frankly, it's liberating to see people doing what they want to do and try to take things in different directions. And we need to start treating each other better as people, just generally.
Yeah, Emilia, I wholeheartedly agree. And to the points that have already been made, I'll add this. We do not need to go back as it relates to childcare, early childhood care, pre-K, that is not offered in schools and after school care. We don't need to go back to where we were because the system that we had was broken. And the business model was broken, how we fund childcare, the business model in terms of the high regulatory requirements and the high barriers on the business owner, whether it's private business or non-for-profit business, and then the low, the cost of childcare that comes in to run that business and what it allows you to pay your employees. So, policy change is necessary, and leaders at the policy level have to be bold. You just have to be bold. Okay, we can't wait for some other city to do it. What is this city doing, or what is that city doing, or what is this state doing, or what is that? So we have to push for policy change. And what does that look like? I mean, it looks like for publicly funded childcare, people need more, per month. We need to keep Step Up to Quality first and foremost. We need to keep that. Okay, and we've had an attack on that last year, and it's going to come back next year. So we've got to defend Step Up to Quality, because that ensures that we have equitable, quality childcare, regardless of where you are in your socioeconomic status. The second thing is we have to look at, those kinds of business. We put it in our recovery and resiliency report for the city of Columbus, but looking at the business model of childcare, where you can do back office functions and combine things by providers, private providers or public providers, HR, finance, et cetera. We need to do that to wring some of the costs out of what it costs to provide childcare. And then the third thing is, we are going to have kind of a combination, probably city, county, state, in terms of funding some of the more, public childcare experiences. And then the last thing I'll add is, yes, universal pre-K is great, but when your kiddos get out of school at 3:00 or 2:45 or 3:30, and you work a job that goes until 5:30, even if you're on a Zoom call, it's difficult, right? To then go, stop, bring your kiddos home, give them something to do, you go back to work. And so at YWCA Columbus, we offer after school care in 3 districts: the United Schools Network Charter School District, the Westerville School District, the Gahanna School District. And we are looking to, continue to change that experience, to adapt to this new way of working, but also hopefully to expand that experience. So between the hours of, 3 and 6:30, and probably need to be thinking about even going a little bit longer, parents have a place for their kiddos to go when they leave school. That is not just about a place to go because mom or dad might be working, but it's also about educational enrichment, healthy play, healthy snack, learning about others in their community and how to, learning about their community and how to be good young citizens and, young participants in the community. And so we want to offer those experiences as well, because parents, even if you're not working at that time, you may want your kiddo to go to a STEM program or something else that enriches their educational experience. And the last thing I'll say is, for those that are listening or watching, the childcare experience, we put so much emphasis on that because that enables women in particular to go to work or to go, to school. And we need that as a part of our entire societal kind of experience. And it needs to be equitable. It needs to be appropriate. It needs to be a place of belonging for all young people and all families. And we have got to be better as a community, and we can't wait until the federal government does what it's going to do or the state government does what it's going to do. We're going to have to make the investment, and we're going to have to make the push. And that's why we put the recommendations that we did in the Recovery and Resiliency Report last fall.
All right, we do have one question that came in for Christy. Can you share more about the current state of the Step Up to Quality?
Sure. So Step Up to Quality, I hope everyone has a foundational understanding. I'll just skim over it. It is a star rating for early childhood, early learning experiences that was a statewide initiative, I'm probably going back, it may have been 6, 7, 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And basically all childcare providers that received any type of public funds for, public assistance those that need public assistance needed at least 1 star by, I believe, the end of 2020, or maybe, yeah, end of 2020. So it's a quality rating. It means that you have, those with certain credentials working in your child care program, and that you're teaching, certain kinds of skills and learnings for the littles throughout their experience, and it ensures just more of a kind of kindergarten readiness kind of program. Okay, and so last year in the state budget, the state legislature in particular, once the budget made its way over to the Senate, they wanted to end Step Up to Quality. Well, why did they want to do that? They wanted to end Step Up to Quality because if you are a provider and you have your star rating, the more stars you get, the more public funds come into your program to provide those services, and that allows you to pay people more. It allows you to hire credentialed and educate those with a degree in education and so forth. And so it's an investment in the child care business as well as in the people that do the work. We can't forget about the people that do the work. And so then you as a parent were assured that you were sending your child to a program that offered, these menu of services. And so the state Senate wanted to basically, change that and take the money out of that system and put it into other things at the state level. We beat back those changes. It took all the way, had to go to the governor, and the governor had to do a line item veto. It may not be that easy next year when we have a new budget. We know it's coming back. We know there's a target on our back, and I cannot tell you why. Why legislators, other than just they will talk about the money, but we have the data. You can go to Groundwork Ohio website, and they can share all the data around, when you invest in this kind of childcare, the improvements around kindergarten readiness and third grade reading increase dramatically across the state. And it's not just in Columbus, but it is across the state that we're looking, to make sure that these investments stay in place.
I think the other point to highlight is that it's ensuring that we also have, again, safe, quality childcare for all families. And I think that that's the other bigger issue here, is that there wasn't the same sort of standard of care. And so you could have taken folks to, part of this effort was also helping to educate childcare providers, right? And to make it more accessible, to ensure that they were meeting standards, so that every young child, every family felt confident in sending their children to any childcare provider based on this rating system. And you had some sort of a guideline so that you would have that peace of mind as well as a parent. Which I think is also key. And so when you take that away, then again, I don't think it's an equity issue, but it's also, quite frankly, a safety issue, for our kids, and ensuring that, parents have that peace of mind and they're sending their children to some place that they, again, will be cared for properly, and that they have all the things that they need and the right people taking care of their kids during that time.
So we did get another question. This audience is engaged, and this is for Emilia. Thanks so much for participating in this important discussion. What role can media play in supporting ideas like universal preschool, expansion of Step Up to Quality, increasing family supports?
Well, Step Up to Quality is something that our editorial board has supported, and we've written a number of stories about the program and also the importance of early childhood education. As we all know, K through 12 education is suffered because of the pandemic. The reading scores is just one example of that they're down in the state of Ohio. Also, we need to shine a light on the kind of the reasons behind some of the opposition to Step Up to Quality. From what I remember, I think one of the arguments was that, small daycare centers can't afford to train their employees, and some of the mom and pop like churches and stuff like that can't do it. But at the end of the day, the education of our children is a primary concern for every Ohio, and if it's not, it should be, because we're not going to have a state that competes in the world, let alone the country, if we we can't get this together, and it's important just not for now, but the future and everything else. So as a media representative, we have to keep the light on it. We have to keep telling these stories and, keep pushing lawmakers to answer questions about why their reasoning for some of the things they do are. So
that's right. Thank you, Emilia, for everything that you did last year. I mean, you had an editorial, you certainly ran some op-eds from some of our organizations. You kept it in the forefront and in the stories, and we need more media stories and media of all types, right? We just held a forum for family voice in policymaking last Thursday, and that is the kickoff, not the end, that's the beginning of our work with Groundwork Ohio, and we want others to join us in this work. We're gonna have some big things happen in the fall. We want families and other childcare providers to get involved in, we got to hold our policymakers accountable. And they have to hear our stories of why this is important. This is not just babysitting. Babysitting is important, right? We know, everybody with children know, look, we need, when we want to, go have an adult break or what have you, babysitting is also important. But this is learning. This is a connection to the K-12 system, and this is the foundational work into the K-12 system. And as Emilia said, if we want our children to be ready to participate in global society and work, whatever work is going to be in the next however many years, right? We want them to be as prepared as possible to do whatever they are set out to do. And the foundations of reading and just those early skills that you learn as a young child, that is so important. And so this is going to be something that we're going to be talking about. Media can follow our website. Groundwork Ohio is our big advocacy organization that we follow. You can follow Future Ready. Columbus, which is doing some of the work, more of the foundational work to look at our local community. You follow Dayton. I know, Emilia, you worked in Dayton. Dayton had kind of a levy of some sorts to provide pre-K, I think, to to families there. Follow Dayton. I can't remember what the name of it is. There's a Strive organization in Cincinnati. I mean, follow the organizations that are all going to be a part of this. And tell the stories. We need all forms of media to put a light on this.
And I would also say, I think the media has a role to play, but I think that we all have a role to play once we see those media stories, right? And it is, I think, we're all moved by different things that affect our lives, but at the end of the day, everything from the multiple bans that you see coming out of the Ohio State House, from the attack on policy that directly affects women and families and communities of color, that affects all of us, whether you feel like you are aligned to that community or not, right? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I think that when we see those stories, we can, Emilia can play her role as, a media person to put out stories. But if that does not move us all to action, right, in the specific roles that we play, and there is no higher office than the office of citizen, whether it's making that call, signing that petition, showing up for, however it is that you show up, right? Whether it's your time, your talent, your treasure, this is a time where we really need to mobilize the community on all fronts, right? And people need to find their voice, and people need to find the lane. Sometimes it's like a 5-minute deal to call your legislator to say, I saw this thing, because people count all of those calls, right? It makes a difference. When I get emails, multiple emails, it doesn't even have to be multiple. I mean, it depends on the legislator. I see one email that shows me that people care and they're paying attention, right? And how we respond. Once that starts to add up, it starts to move that priority to the front of the line, right? So I think that this is a time now more than ever that we are just seeing a shift in policy that is adversely affecting especially women and families. And so I think that we can push back to like, what is what are politicians doing? What is media doing? But also we have to beg the question of like, what are we all doing? What are we doing? What am I doing? Right? As a citizen, what am I doing to advance this work? Because it is always before the people that change happens.
I would just add to that real quick. Also you gotta vote. Like literally, you have to help people be informed citizens. And that's all it is too. There's a lot of garbage out there, misinformation about whatever issue you can think of. We just have to hold each other accountable, just like you hold your lawmakers accountable. When you see things that are not true, you got to push back on that. And most importantly, you got to vote. You have to encourage your young people in your life to vote as well, and your older people too, because a lot of young people right now are feeling like things are not going the right way, and they feel a little, they feel like things can't get better. But we still have a democracy, and one of the most important things as citizens is to vote. So,
thank you for those comments and insights. So for those currently working, nearly 50% of women in America do so in low-wage jobs. The rate's even higher for women of color. In fact, 60% of women of color in Ohio earn less than a living wage. How can female leadership facilitate the career progression and growth of female coworkers? And anyone can start, whoever wants to start that off.
Well, I'll start, because I'm a woman and I lead, an organization that is about empowering women and eliminating racism. And, our organization has worked hard. When I started here 5 years ago, we had a number of people being paid well under $15 an hour. Let me just say that. And when I started, the board was like, a directive that I got, shortly after I began working here was to move people to $15 an hour. And I do not subscribe that is the, end all be all, right? But at a minimum, let's move to get people to those wages. And for full-time employees at the YWCA Columbus, we have been able to get people to $15 an hour and above, those people who were under. Now, we still have some part-time work that is at about $14.50 that we're working, to get to that $15 an hour. And part of that is market forces, and the other part is, we realize that most of the people making some of those wages, they worked in particular in our housing or our childcare and after-school care programs. And so, we had to really fundamentally look at those businesses, right? We always say at the Y, we have 3 pillars and 3 pillars of business. Childcare and the after-school care experience, kind of brings revenue in. But housing and homeless services, for those of you that went to B school like me, those are the lost leaders, basically, right? And they don't bring revenue in. And yet we were not receiving funding that would support us moving wages up in that area. And disproportionately, the people that worked in the housing area were Black and brown and women. Now, I pushed hard to, get more funding. So where does the funding come from? Federal, state, local, to fund our housing programs, because it's, shelter and it is supportive housing. And yet I also said, we're not going to wait to start moving wages up. And so incrementally, we just strapped it on our back. We started raising more money. We used philanthropy to fill in the gap. And when I started at the organization, philanthropy was funded about 42% of housing programs. And now philanthropy funds 76%. And that is not sustainable. And so, I say I am the chair of the Human Services Chamber, and I use, that experience as this. The sector is largely, a lot of women work in the human service sector, and a number of Black and brown people disproportionately. Michael Cord is probably going to talk about this at the Human Service, the Metropolitan Club in a few weeks. But disproportionately, our sector employs, folks, that are women and Black and brown. And those individuals disproportionately are paid a wage that is difficult for them to sustain, and live on in our community, whether it's, they're paying more than 30% of their income for rent, transportation costs, etc. And we as a community have got to decide that we're going to be better than that. And so what does that mean? We're going to have to fund some of the social services sector in a different way. We're going to have to look at other models. We're going to have to, I pushed for, equitable funding for the housing sector, especially while we're having a difficult time finding affordable housing in our community. And those are things, again, we're going to have to do. And I know that, it's not just government, it's business, and it's us. So we always say, look, we'll do our part. We will fundraise, and we will use our machines that can make money to bring money into the organization. But I also have to have my public sector folks as my partner, because ultimately the work that we are doing is for the good of the community, and we can't do it by ourselves. And the last thing I will say is, for the work that we do, sometimes when I look at the equitable way that we go about just getting funding is unequitable, right? I used to be a lobbyist. I could walk in the door and I could have conversations with people and I could get deals done and all that. I can't even activate in the same way, right? So we've got to be thinking about, how we go about, in particular, this sector that employs such a large number of women, helping the helpers. And we've got to, these are tough. Leadership is tough. It's just tough, right? I remember, thinking about how to get people to $15 an hour. And I remember the CFO going, well, that's about a $400,000 swing. How are you going to do that, right? And you have to be creative, and you have to think about how you're going to do that. And it's not just the social service sector, the food service industry, right? Disproportionately women working in that sector, and how we're going to fund those folks. And I know John Barker from the Restaurant Association has been pushing hard to get more resources, into restaurant business, and to think about how they pay folks that are in those service industries. We dominate in those sectors, and those sectors have low wage paying jobs. And then when you add the childcare barriers on top of that, it makes it difficult for us to get a foothold, to get to work, to get to school, to even get a job that pays, better, and take care of our families, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a compounding effect.
Well, I'd like to share two statistics I like numbers. And so I think to add some perspective to what Christy was sharing. So, we commemorate, I guess you would say, equal pay days throughout the calendar year, right? So, and obviously this is affected by the pandemic, but we can see when we talk about the adverse effect on specific communities. So last year, in 2021, Black Women's Equal Pay Day, Black women are paid 58 cents on the dollar for every dollar paid to their white male counterpart, right? Last year was August 3rd. This year, September 21st. For Latina women, last year it was in October, and this year Latina women are paid 49 cents for every dollar paid to a white man. This year, our equal pay day is December 8th. So we're actually going furthest in the calendar. Latina women are paid less than Native American women, which were 50 cents on the dollar, only a penny more. Over our lifetimes, we will lose over $1 million, right? Because we are not being paid enough. Those equal pay days essentially represent how far into the year we would have to work. So almost a whole 2 years you would have to work to make as much as your white male counterparts, right? So first and foremost, to Christy's point, we need to think about how are we paying people? And when I think about equal pay, I don't just think about women who might be on this call. I think about, women like my mother who worked on a pharmaceutical line the entirety of her career, right? That's the closest she got to her dream of becoming a nurse, was packaging medicine. She rode the bus to work every single day, has never driven a day in her life. My mother is a refugee from Cuba, who this was her her car was a COTA bus and her job was standing on a line where she had to get both knees replaced and has arthritis in both hands today at 82 as a going away present from her career of working on this line. And that is a story of many women. And so when I think about how there's a threshold that we need to pay women, but we also need to think about, again, where are we placing our priorities? Right? It's interesting. Christy and I sat on a very similar conversation to this. We talked about early childhood, or we are not early childhood development. We talked about childcare, and people were saying, well, if we're not paying childcare workers enough or we need to pay them more, then it's going to make it so that people can't afford childcare. And they're like, what's the answer? I'm like, the answer is simple, pay people more. Everybody just needs to make more money. We need to make more money. Right? And when we think about, when we are more concerned about our bottom line than our people, then our values have shifted. Right? And what we need to start thinking about is, how are we investing in our people? Because our thinking is wrong. Our thinking is not, if we invest in our people, if we are doing things the right way, if we're addressing the now as we plan for the later, when we start thinking about economic development and transportation, which is really our next social justice issue, because as Columbus continues to grow, when you have to make a decision between your rent and a car, what do you think is going to win? And if we are not providing people an opportunity to get to those good paying jobs, to get to that Intel job, or to get to that Columbus promise, or whatever it is that we are giving to people, if we are not providing the venue for them to do that and closing that gap, then it's all for naught. Right? So we need to start thinking about, again, how are we investing in systems and making the systems work for the people instead of making people work for the systems that we already know are broken and that are not working. And so I think to the point of how do we get bold, it's the tension is how do we get bold? How do we match our social service partners who are pushing us in government to be bolder, to pushing our elected officials? And also, how are we bringing people along? Because part of this question is, how do we support people? I think it's also about women. How do women support other women? How do we make it so that when we become the Christy Angels and the Emilias and the Lourdeses, how are we carving a path for other women and keeping them in mind so that we are bringing them along with us and that we, again, are centering ourselves in their success? Because until we do that, we're going to continue to have these conversations. So we need to actually, again, change where the conversation is centered. Because right now we're just trying to fix a system that's already broken instead of just breaking the system and say, let's think about what's going to actually work and start from there.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say this too, a lot of times they say, go find a mentor, right? We need to find women to advocate for. We have to actively seek out women who we can bring along. It's not a one-way street. Like you were just saying, it's about bringing people up and about encouraging people. And if you see somebody with a talent, pointing them in the right direction. Because a lot of times people just don't know they don't know what they don't know. So you have to help guide people, even if they're not in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And thank you, Councilwoman, for talking about the bold, and what I say, bold and courageous action. And I think one of the other things that we have to decide as a community, and again, we might be the first to do this. We might be in the middle, I don't know, but we have to say in our community, maybe it starts with these Intel announcements. We're not going to bring jobs just for the sake of, we want to count how many jobs we brought in every year. We're going to bring in the jobs that are aligned with our values and our values as a community. And maybe our values as a community maybe we have to, go on I hope we don't have to go on another study of anything, because we've been studying everything. No more studies, okay? But maybe the value should be that you pay people a wage that allows them to live in this community, and that you either provide some kind of childcare because you're a large enough agency to provide some of those amenities, or you make sure that people get some of those, whether it's a credit or a stipend or something of that sort, or you have a different kind of work day. As we've heard, where certain shifts, provide for people to work and they don't have to worry about childcare. We as childcare providers need to be thinking about making sure that you have weekend coverage and evening coverage, because we know more and more people are working, in these different types of organizations with different shifts. I mean, I think we as a community have to make those decisions, put our flag, plant our flag and say, these are our values and these are the kinds of jobs we want here. These are kinds of employers we want here. These are kind of the things we want to uplift in our social sector. It's a mindset change, but we're ready for it. If we're going to we know what not doing this looks like. We can all point to communities that have, overburdened with homelessness, overburdened with this, high housing costs, all those things. Like we know, where else is it that the book is written for you to look back and say, oh, if I don't do certain things, that's what's going to happen. So we have to do that bold, courageous action and lead and make some big steps. And, what's the worst that's going to happen? Okay, so you don't get, maybe a certain type of job because it was going to pay, people to work on the line for $14.50, $15 an hour, and you end up with a different, type of job that is paying people, $22 or $24, and they can actually take care of themselves. And then, the reward of that is perhaps ultimately you're spending less on some of the social services and the social needs, because people can take care of themselves. And so I think we've got to be bold and think about those kinds of things. And beyond thinking, we've got to act on those kinds of things.
And we just got an audience question that ties into what we're talking about right now. And they want to know, with the high cost of groceries and gas due to inflation, what is a good hourly amount to aim for in the Columbus metro area for a single person to survive? They feel like $15 an hour doesn't really do it.
Yeah.
I think that this is, when we start talking about what is, it's interesting. There's many ways I want to answer this question. So I think that as we think about, like, what is a median income for a particular part of Columbus, that number fluctuates. And I don't think as a community have really come to a place where we feel most comfortable saying, what is the median income for where, right? Because as we see housing costs and what is driving our housing costs, because we have such low stock right now and the housing demand is so high that it is driving up our costs, right? So it is driving up those median incomes in places where we know that that's not actually real. Not for the people who have been there or the people who are from that community, right? And so I think as we continue to think about what is a fair hourly wage, there's many factors that we need to start taking into consideration, and we need to start changing what is driving those factors, right? Especially in a place where the world is changing and it's affecting, we see that now with gas prices, right? We see things that are affecting our economy because we are becoming more and more of a global economy. And so even here in Columbus, we are feeling the effects of that. And so how are we thinking about how we stay in step with a changing economy, and how do we stay centered as a community to ensure that our community stays affordable for folks and that we are addressing those other drivers that we don't have in our control, right? So it is a delicate balance of how we continue to do that. And I think that we need to start changing the conversation. I think it's also important for folks to know that I think, especially as we think about like a city council, this is not a football team. We are 7 individual members, right? That we are all driving different policy platforms. And there are times where we come together coalesce around specific issues. But I just think it's important for folks to remember that, because I think that as we address issues and as we think about folks who are championing issues, it's not just about bodies, it's also about individuals. And it's about how we work together as a community and we coalesce. And we're not just thinking that there is one solution, that it's just going to be city council or it's just going to be this sector or that sector. It really takes us all coming together around these issues, both from the private, public, and the nonprofit sector, to address even something as simple as what do people need to make to live off of it? Because we each own a piece of that and drive a piece of that.
I agree. And also a shout out to my friend Danielle Sydnor, who is the I don't know if she's executive director of the Franklin County Innovation Rise Together Center. I probably just jumbled the whole name because it's very long. But Danielle is new to our community, but she's starting to unpack Franklin County's Rise Together report on reducing poverty in our community. And she's starting to really start to think about what the work is going to look like. And I'm excited that she's here, that she's got some great ideas. I'm certainly not going to steal her thunder. I'm not on her board. I'm just a big fan of hers and the work that they're doing. And I encourage you to start to follow the center, because it is an innovation center. And I think Danielle's going to start teeing up some things, whether it's around income or other policy changes or programmatic things that need to occur to move people beyond, and I say poverty, but also, looking at what does a person need to make to live in our community. And she's going to be able to look at some of those parts of our community. Well, the other thing I will say, I just finished a book called Fixer Upper, Fixing America's Broken Housing System. And most people, I read it for the second time on Sunday, and I started texting people, and I'm sure they're all like, what is going on with her? She's texting us, pages from the book, but it was a playbook on how to fix the broken housing system. And essentially what we need in our community is for people not to pay more than 30% of their income for rent. So that means you have to have housing at all price points, because 30% for me is different than 30% for the person that might work at a Cameron Mitchell restaurant or Starbucks or what have you, or has a family versus an individual. We also need for people, it's 30% of your income, but it's also your transportation costs combined. And we are such a car-centric community that everybody feels like feels like or needs to have a car to get to where they need to go to work. I have an example of that. Somebody who was supposed to start our, organization, come to work, they're a new employee, didn't show up this week, and they didn't show up because their car broke down. And the person doesn't live near a bus line and can't get to work. So basically it was like, I'm just going to mail you my ID and everything, and I quit. We're like, wait, we can help you pay for your car. We can help you because we want that person. But that's how people, they just give up because they don't see any options, right? And so we've got to be looking at mobility options. We've got to take a look at some of the new things that Code is trying to deploy. They're going to take over the Licking County system, I believe, or merge with it. That's going to get people to Intel. Like, we've got to be all in as citizens, going back to that notion of the citizenry, as Emilia mentioned. We've got to vote for things that make sense. We're all going to have to participate in the pay. We're just going to have to, because it's got to be paid for some kind of way. And we've got to really think about, again, back to our community, all types of housing. And it's great for us to talk about all types of housing, but that means I, as a person where I live, I've got to be willing to have a person that lives next to me, who might need to be on a Section 8 certificate or pays a lower, rent. I've got to have affordable next to me. I can't be like, yeah, we need affordable housing, but not in my neighborhood. We're going to have to not be that community. And I know that that's hard, and we're going to be talking about that more and more this year with some things that we're going to roll out with YWCA Columbus and our activists and agitators event in the fall. But I just encourage people to think about, it can't just be, it has to be, we're going to have some yes in my backyard. We're going to have housing at all price points. We're going to have different types of housing that has accessory dwelling units so people can age in place and bring their loved ones, to live with them. We're going to have infill housing that may look different, maybe doubles, maybe triples, because you can get more housing on the land than just a single family. We're going to have to give up, 1 acre lots and 3-car garages. We're going to have to be different around housing so people don't have to pay so much for rent. And the last thing or mortgage. And the last thing I will say is this: $15 an hour is certainly not the wage. I made $15.31 in September of 1993 when I took my first job at City Council as a junior policy aide. and my rent was $545, and I had no car payment, and I had no more student loan payments. And I struggled then to really make ends meet, pay all my bills, et cetera, et cetera. My parents can probably tell you all the times they were like, okay, here's a loan, right, for this or that. And that was in 1993. So we know that that is not the right wage.
Mhm.
So I think we have time for a couple questions. As we think about all of this, there's been a lot of conversation about doing more to ensure racial equity and diversity. What are concrete ways, and you've mentioned some, that you are all seeing the concept turn into action at your organizations?
Well, I think one thing is to acknowledge that there is a problem. Luckily, a lot of organizations have done that and are doing that. And also not to take your foot off the gas. After George Floyd, everybody was talking about racism as a public health crisis. What now? Like, what have you done? It's more than just words, it's actions now. You have to really start to make the difference and change policies and who you push for when you try to hire folks. That is key. If you don't do that, it's just words.
Yeah, agreed. And it just can't be, I want a diverse workforce, but you have to think about, what am I doing to create a sense of belonging? So how do I recognize that, people need flexible holiday schedules because, there are different holidays that different people from different backgrounds and ethnicities celebrate. How do I honor and respect different cultures in my community? How do I, just create that sense of you belong here, and people, you're not the only one, right? But there are others who look like you and that respect you. And I think it always starts with just first a healthy dose of respect, and go on your own learning journey, and then create, if you need, training and development and workshops within your organization so that others can further their journey, then create a space for that as well.
And I think that if there was a word of the day, it would be systems, right? I think that really moving towards equity is a mind shift change. It's not performative things. It's not showing up and saying, oh, look, we are more diverse because we hired more diverse people, or equity is meeting people where they are. And meeting people where they are is, again, a systems and a mind shift change. And that means that it's people work. And so there needs to be work that we're all going to do, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable, and it's going to challenge you. And that's what it's supposed to do, right? And then there's systems work, because we as people will not always respond the way that we should, because everybody is on a different journey when they think about equity. But we can ensure that there's equity within systems. So when people fail, the system doesn't fail, right? And so I think that that is the difference when we're working towards equity, is that you're meeting people where they are. I think that people think of equity in the most basic definition of the term, which means I'm going to give you all the same. That's not true. It's not true when if someone is 6 feet tall and I'm 5'3", we need different things. I'm going to need 4 crates. They only need 1. Like, it is a different mindset. It's meeting me and understanding that there are certain challenges that I'm going to have because of whatever, right? Because of whatever identities I hold, because of whatever other challenges I may have. And so that means that, yes, to meet me, I'm going to need a little bit more of a runway. And that's okay. That's okay, because we already know the system is not set up for me. Right. So I think that that's where the discussion really needs to lie, and people having that understanding of what equity is. And I think that, to Emilia's point, it's putting your foot on the gas. It's having those difficult conversations, and it's allowing space for those conversations. And it's centering us again on people, and centering us on the people who need the people who are the furthest away from justice. Because ultimately, when we do that, all boats rise. All boats rise. Everyone benefits from that, because we're moving people closer to equity, closer to justice.
That one other thing too, obviously at the State House, there's a lot of regressive things going on. And some people go, well, that doesn't impact me, directly, so it doesn't impact me. But as we all know, we're all connected. And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of voting and seeing the bigger picture. Obviously, your legislator picks the laws, but then you have to think about the way the U.S. Constitution is created and who picks Supreme Court judges, and where it all goes is all connected. Everything in our society is connected. Luckily, Columbus is at a point where I think people are working to solve some of these questions. People like Danielle in particular see the connections, and it's exciting because people are working on this stuff, so that's good.
Well, thanks for sharing your insights today. It's been a fascinating discussion. I mean, so many critical and important points were made. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. We did have a lot more audience questions. This is a very engaged audience that we didn't get to, but I want to close it out. As a trusted partner in Central Ohio, for nearly 100 years, United Way is committed to working side by side with our community and for our community toward a better tomorrow. United Way brings donors, volunteers, advocates, nonprofits, leaders, and more to take on Central Ohio's toughest challenges. We hope that you will continue to join us for future conversations like this one that can be found at liveunitedcentralohio.org/events, because our community is stronger when we show up united. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.